Hi there, welcome. Okay, I should do something bad and say, "Oh, we're live," but it is what it is. Hold on. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Dun 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 dun. Let me share it live on. Da, 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 da. There, I X'd it. I did that. So let's go talk about things. Welcome, everybody. It is the live stream Friday. Again, this is Friday, August 2nd. Yesterday was August 1st. It was the 8th. I think it was it was the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Uprising. I missed the whistle blowing out. I think what time is the whistle blow? I think it's 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Well, they started the uprising. They blew whistles all through the country, and the Home Army uprised against the German occupants. I've always had some Polish friends who always argued to me that the uprising was the greatest mistake. It was the gift to the communists. Stalin did not cooperate, was not going to allow the uprising. That the Poles wanted to liberate themselves. The Home Army wanted to liberate themselves, and Stalin had no intention of that happening. Stalin wanted revenge for the Poles stopping the Soviets in 1920. And in fact, remember, Stalin was a general, was one of the leading people in the South who was defeated by the Poles and pushed out. So he was humiliated in a certain sense by the Poles and wanted vengeance. Hence why the NKVD committed mass genocide against the Poles who were captured at the Polish officers in the Polish military. Every time anywhere under the Soviet rule area, there was a class side, a mass genocide against not against the whole people, but against the elites. Extermination of the elites, the officer class, the educated class. I mean, this is why the Nazis and the communists, were equal opportunity. They were kind of equal. They were both mass murderers, and the difference was Russia. The communists did it under a class-based rationale, whereas the Germans did it under a kind of pseudo-race base nationale, which is interesting. That the Slovaks were seen as alien. Slovaks and Hungarians were seen as Aryan adjacent, whereas the Czechs and the Poles were Untermenschen. Right. This is the where some Ukrainians, Ukrainians and Belarusians, and the Baltic populations who welcomed the Germans were seen as acceptable, in fact, even welcomed into the new organizations like the SS, but the others were not. Okay, so you had a very, very, very weird situation in this sense. So the uprising was a disaster in the sense it destroyed the Warsaw intellectuals. It was in fact, it was a great tragedy because it destroyed not only much of Warsaw, but allowed the Germans to exterminate basically the Home Army. The Home Army basically comes out and plays. If it waited, in other words, the same thing happened. And what happened in, I think it was in the Lithuanian capital, technically under that's the Hungarian. It was the city of Vilnius. When Vilnius was liberated when there was an uprising in Vilnius, the Russians let the Germans, didn't come and help them. They came in and just swept them off the side. It was, in other words, they weren't going to accept Polish a Polish self-help operation. And Stalin purposefully prevented any assistance to the Polish operation. In fact, Market Garden, in other words, the Polish paratroop regiment, that Red Brigade that was part of Market Garden, which was slaughtered at Market Garden needlessly, was supposed to go jump into Poland, okay, and assist. But Stalin blocked it, and by blocking the planes from going back, it would be very difficult to go back, there and back without refueling in Russia. So, it was, the Russians purposely delayed, and the communist agitators, I think, provoked the leadership of the Home Army to go, knowing that they weren't going to get Allied help and knowing that there would be a slaughter, and let the Germans kill them off and we don't have to do it ourselves. And this is why this is a tragedy. Warsaw was destroyed in the conflict, worse than even the 1939 attacks. I mean, this is where the real destruction of Warsaw begins. House-to-house fighting and house-to-house blowing up things. The needing to, the flattening of Warsaw to a great degree. This force and the death of hundreds of thousands of the Polish middle class, the real extermination of the Polish middle class. So the uprising is kind of celebrated by certain elements on the right, and certain elements on the left try to regain it also, and they try to co-opt it. The anti-communists always used the Home Army as a symbol of this resistance to communism. Many Home Army soldiers after the war were hunted down and refused to surrender. And therefore there's the case. So the stories of the forgotten soldiers, or the condemned men, who fought against the Russia. Some of them hid out until the 1950s and early 60s. Okay, many of these AK people were hunted down right after the war, 46, 47. Were hunted down by the UB, the Polish allies of the security services of the Polish communists with the NKVD to exterminate things. So there's a good movie, General X, which people should watch. It's a Polish movie about a famous, one of the leaders of the Home Army that helped the organization. They engaged in the movements assassinated one of the leading SS Gestapo generals in the eastern area. Not as high as Heinrich, but close. In 43, 44, I forget the operation. And then was responsible for the home rising. And then after the war, he was kind of captured, sent there. The communists didn't know who they got. They they sent him, like they took hundreds of thousands of Poles, threw them into camps in the West as slave laborers with German soldiers as they looted the country, raped and looted the country. The Soviets did. So he was returned back in the late 40s, early 50s after like this, and then they kind of said, "Oh, you're a fascist." The family was kicked out of their apartment because they were fascist and things like this. Which is hilarious. The man who fought the Nazis is the fascist. Okay, this is Soviet stupid thinking that much of because remember what happens after the war. The new Polish elites are the communists and the peasants raised by the communists to be the new political elite. Okay, so therefore today's Polish elite are basically the children and great grandchildren of the communist hacks, traitors, and monsters. Mass murderers who have blood on their hands and deserve, if we hunt Nazis down, we should hunt these fuckers down too. Therefore, there's an ambiguity about this among the intellectual. Now, some of the intellectuals, they embrace it, but then they want to recontextualize it. So that was today in Polish history. That was yesterday in Polish history. the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Uprising. Now, this is not to be confused with what happened in 43 of the Ghetto Uprising. Now, the communists welcomed heroicizing the ghetto, and during the communist years, the Soviet communists embraced Western and particularly Germans' desire to redeem themselves in the eyes of humanity, and therefore they elevated the heroism of the ghetto uprising. What's our ghetto uprising in '43? But the ghetto uprising was, and the reason why is many of the Jewish leaders of the things were communist adjacent or communist, and many of the communist leadership had that came and stayed in Moscow were Jews. Go see what's her name? What's her wonderful Caviar and Ashes? Caviar and Ashes. Macy Shore, yeah, Macy Shore. Macy Shore is the wife of Timothy. Was it? Yeah, Macy Shore, if I remember correctly. Yes, Macy Shore. Marcy Shore. Caviar and Ashes, Yale University Press. But Marcy Shore, if I remember correctly, is the wife of Timothy. Tim Snyder. Okay, of white. Tim Snyder, Timothy Snyder, the historian who's constantly currently there. He's where Yale University. I think she's at Yale University also. Yeah, she's at Yale in intellectual history, and he's at Yale. It's a husband and wife Yale team, right? He is famous for what is that famous? He got the Pulitzer for the Bloodlands, right? About the Black Earth. He writes popular history things. And on tyranny, which he talks about the themes of this, and also he's kind of part of these new liberals who are like, oh my God, democracy isn't. But even Marcy, really in her book, even though she says, well, we shouldn't. At the end, she equivocates, but she shows the connection between the Jewish elites, the liberal, progressive Jewish elites that were in Poland, that were there, the elites who embraced communism, and they embraced the communist situation, and their and the Holocaust that happened, and therefore, and the kind of their embracing and hatred of all things Polish. It's a very powerful book in that sense, because it's that, oh no, we shouldn't, it's at one level she says, well, the Holocaust is horrible and it's like this, and we shouldn't feel guilt about that, but we are guilty. Yes, we are guilty for our role in the communist event, which kind of led, in many ways. It was the fear of the Bolsheviks that legitimized, in many people's eyes, the Nazis. In that sense, that made, in other words, it was the Nazis were not, in many ways, the Nazis was a reaction. We know the history of what happened immediately after the Soviet World War I ended, and the collapse of the German Empire and the establishment of Weimar, were the Soviets in Munich and other places, and the attempt by what's her name. Rosa Luxemburg and those activists in Berlin trying to form a Soviet Red Uprising, which is the communist uprising in Berlin, which led to the Free Corps, the volunteer German ex-veterans forming voluntary associations, waging war against, killing her. Oh my God, the Free Corps was the Nazis. No, the Free Corps some elements of the Free Corps kind of led into the Nazis, but yes, the Free Corps was mostly an anti-communist rebellion, but it was, but the failure of this and the continued agitation of the communists normalized the crisis, And it was the political genius and opportunism of this guy named Hitler, taking a minor party and understanding. Now, Hitler's genius was his ability to market. He was a marketing genius in that sense. Hitler understood the psychology of the mass. He was a showman. He was a failed artist, yes, but being a failed artist gave him an understanding of showmanship and imagery and symbols, and the power of symbols, and the power of persuasion in ways, and the mass communication, and the ability to communicate symbolically, and also in ways that English, and in ways that English, in the German setting, Hitler was going to be very effective. What he did, he was highlighting what was within the German consciousness, the German soul, the longing for Germany, the longing of a Germany that was set in motion by the French Revolution, and the undermining of the German states because of the victorious revolution of the French, and the overturning, which set. In other words, the French Revolution set the longing for Germany and unification of Germany. And then what happened was that this unification was guided not by the German states themselves, but by Prussia, who used it for its own end and create people would argue the ersatz Germany, which was destined to fail. Wilhelmine Germany was to fail because it was an ersatz Germany. That's what Nietzsche's point was, right? And that the longing. So if the first Reich was the Holy Roman Empire, the Second Reich was the ersatz Germany of the Wilhelmines. The Third Reich was going to. Everyone was saying as the collapse of the 19th century, going into the 20th century, was this longing for a Third Reich. Right. This is something that Leo Strauss, in his autobiographical reflection, perfectly summarizes the kind of sociological, cultural things that this Nietzsche's, the German people at the twilight of the 20th century clearly indicate. They were dissatisfied with the Germany of the Wilhelmine, this Second Reich, which was a kind of phony ersatz Reich, and that's that. So therefore, that is kind of the understanding. Now, what is so interesting, why I mention this, is the understand that the people miss it. You have to understand what the Nazis were. The Nazis were really legitimated by the fear of the Bolsheviks, and the Bolshevik fear was a real fear. It was a mass murder. It was going to be, there is this kind of, we can argue that the Nazis were just cleaner, more effective mass murderers than the communists, but the communists were bigger, more brutal, and less organized and less efficient, but just as widespread and just as, in fact, more destructive. And then the Chinese version of it. It's up to Lenin and Stalin did this much mass murder. Let's boost it up some, Mao and the communists. And then the wonderful Cambodian experience, which then tripled down on it, right? With madness of the French postmodern thinking added to it. Back to the example of the Polish elite. The current Polish elite is not a true Polish elite. It is an after. Now, it is the twofold. It's opportunists. The communists, and Polish communists were mostly opportunistic communists. You had a very small percent. Most of your Czech communists were true believers. Polish communists, they were usually the Jewish, in that sense, the true believers. But then after 1968, 67, 68, when I forget the guy, the Polish leader at the time, 68 in Poland was a kind of anti-Semitic purge, right? Well, this was also this was a purge of the hardcore communists as well, the Stalinists. To understand the anti-Semitic purge of 68 in Poland, you have to understand it wholly in the light of purging the Stalinists as well. And therefore, you have to understand this aspect of this. And I think this is problematic. This is oh, you're saying some things that are going to be controversial. Oh, anti-Semitism. No, let's be honest. I'm not doing this out of hate of Jews. I don't hate Jews. I hate liberals and radicals. Yeah, I hate them. I don't hate them. I see them for the threat they are, the dangerous threat they are. I never hate in that sense. Hating only destroys you. I don't hate them. I just despise them and think they're dangerous. And needing to be dealt with in a certain way. But do I hate them personally? No, it's not personal. Hating only harms the hater, not anyone else. This is why I kind of worry about people like Nick Fuentes, because I think there is a little bit of hate of something. The resentment and bitterness has kind of turned dark and silly in a certain way. Same thing with this is my problem with Candace Owen. I kind of sympathize with her position, but she goes too far, and she's become even weirder and weirder. Like same thing with Keon West. I can never say Yee, right? The same thing, that they take a legitimate concern. I mean, this is the same thing I knew. A friend of mine, this Korean friend of mine, who was persecuted by he was studying Jewish studies because he was interested in Old Testament scholarship, right? And you go into, instead of studying Hebrew Bible, and this, he wanted to study the prophets and these things. And he wanted to study Hebrew, and Hebrew and these things were taught in Jewish studies department, usually controlled by either liberal Zionists or Zionists, who then looks at suspicion of a Christian person coming into our program. So therefore, they but anyway, this Korean guy now, if he came in, and then he started concerned. He had like these foundation grants from these human rights groups. The famous guy who saved Jews, the Swedish diplomat, I can't remember his name. It's slipping my mind. A foundation to go do work in Israel, right? And then what happened was that he met Christians, ethnic Christians, not Christians in terms of him, but like Palestinians, these, and so kind of discrimination that was in there, particularly of the Palestinian Christians. Now, of course, not many Palestinians are Christians, so understand that in that sense. But his experience of how certain Christian communities were treated there, laying his own sense of discrimination of being Korean in certain black neighborhoods, led to kind of this thing. And then going back to university and have these Jewish professors haunt him, challenge him, not challenge him legitimately, but challenge him. Why are you a Christian studying with us? This is for Jews. You shouldn't be here. You're trespassing. In a way, in a similar way, African American groups would treat people who don't think belong in their organizations and their things, right? So therefore, there is this kind of zealot, ideological, dogmatic tribalism that creates reactions. Well, this is the natural dynamic by which reaction, hatred, suspicion, conspiracy emerges. And I can see the same thing, in the story of Nick Fuentes and with the rise of this guy called the Israeli lobby-centric neoconservatives, okay, who was controlling the Bush years of the Bush, the Institute of Conservative Inc. and the institutions that attracted young conservatives to kind of get them organized and get them in there. And Nick was brought into those circles, and then when he kind of presented paleoconservative questions about immigration and these were not at all welcome. And the fact that he was a kind of a young Catholic who's understand this was even but Vatican I kind of kind of a reactionary Catholic. This was even more problematic in the eyes, particularly of Jewish neoconservatives and these institutions, who insisted on loyalty to Israeli concerns, right? And seeing anyone questioning any loyalty, and anyone who had more as much loyalty to Israel as the United States, or questioning the relationship between Israel and the United States as really those who are who raising the two citizen, the double loyalty argument. the double loyalty argument was also not only with Jews, it was also leveled at Catholics too. Remember, this is funny that that if you're going to accuse Fuentes of that, you can just throw it back in his face. Well, why are you a Catholic and not equally whose loyalty to the Pope means you're a double loyalty as well? The double loyalty argument works against hardcore Catholics as well as Jews. So I think the Jewish neoconservative activists who reacted to Fuentes in his early stage overplayed didn't play their argument correctly, and didn't. I mean, they're stupid. Most of these guys, most of these want to be, these kind of people are kind of idiots, and that leadership picks activists rather than thoughtful people. I mean, if ISI and those organizations actually brought in real academics with real and promoted real academics to head these things, and who headed the education programs, people who had some kind of understanding of the material and understood conservative values, instead of bringing these young activists or people who are more activist oriented and I can argue well. Okay, great, you can argue well, but do you understand the material at all? Do you understand the things? And can you even maybe address those on the you can address those on the right who have dissident views, and show them where they're treat them seriously, treat them where they're have legitimate concerns legitimately, but then show them where they err or where they go too far. And that's the mistake. The solution in the late 1990s and the early thousands is that no, we need minorities more than this. So I think they tracked Fuentes in because of his last name sounded Hispanic, and therefore Hispanic from Chicago, and therefore they wanted to play the kind of left-wing identity politics kind of politics. Same thing why they, embraced Candace Owen, who's a leftist. She started out as a leftist. She was on the left. She was a grifter. She was always a grifter. People like Candace Owen. She was a grifter on the left, who the left dismisses, who the left themselves thought too much that she was a grifter. Okay. And then she became Red Pill. She rebranded herself as Red Pill, Red Pill Black. And then that just led to her own trajectory, she became increasingly more radical. Now, ironically, people argue, I know AA argues that AA had a good video recently where he talked about, these levels of constraint, how the conservative movement has these levels of actors who are designed to kind of grab a hold of, redefine, and reshape the conservative movement. And while I think there's some truth to this thing, as those who talk about conservative Inc. and people like Paul Gottfried and many scholars talked about this in the 1990s, early thousands, about what's happened in the right with the kind of gatekeepers and those things, and the way the donor class and the creation of the institutions kind of attempted to gatekeep and to promote certain people and block other people. This is what I say that what's wrong, and I think he's right, but he gets it wrong. I think he goes too far, and this is my problem with AI. I think because he doesn't understand. I lived this. I experienced it. Okay. Luckily, I never got as bitter as those other people. So I never. Mel Bradford taught me correctly. Never take this personally. Politics cannot be treated personally, because if you treat it personally, you'll go mad and it'll only destroy you. So yes, I got residual resentment from being affected by this, and I resent a lot of conservative institutions, how they betrayed young conservatives growing up and trying to do this, and promoted people who were less conservative or less good, but promoted them because of their potential of showing our diversity and this game symbolism of diversity hiring, to which kind of echoed that. In other words, playing the game of the left, which I think as you're going to lose. You can only lose. You can't win. You can't. If you accept the enemy's rules, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And the right was constantly at a disadvantage at this thing, because what happens is that once you bring these kind of people in, they will move the conservative directions and towards the direction of the left. So that is the contention here, and this is why the people, when I look at Fuentes and look at this AAs, he says that Fuentes and Owen are now so demonized. They are kind of like a trap. These are the kind of people that they want young people to go to the right to get to them, so they can be pointed to and say, "Oh yeah, he liked Fuentes, so he's a racist," and to destroy and to marginalize. I think there is a little bit of truth, but it's not that they are agents or feds, but rather the path they took, the path these people took, were not guided by thoughtful conservatives. Some older thoughtful conservatives should have reached out and helped them. Instead, they developed on their own and only through self-help, self-understanding. Okay. And then what happened is worse is that then other grifters, the neocon, what I call the center neocon grifters, like the Ben Shapiro's and the Dave Rubins of this movement. Dave Rubin, the gay guy. There's been gay conservatives, but Rubin was, Rubin is this is conservative. I'm reminded of my teacher's Mel Bradford's famous line, in a world where to conserve is to perpetuate the outrageous, reaction becomes a necessary position. Okay. Rubin was a 90s liberal, always was a 90s. Gay marriage is not a conservative position. I'm sorry. Conservative does not stand for being against gay marriage. Does that mean we're going to go lynch? We're going to hunt down and beat up gay people and lynch them? No. Toleration is not. Yes, toleration can be a conservative position, but toleration does not mean acceptance. So let's distinguish between what toleration is, what toleration truly is. Toleration is, if they demand acceptance, that's not toleration. And you should never accept if you think gay marriage and gay lifestyle is reprehensible and immoral and destructive to health of the person and the community, then how can a conservative or anyone wishing to conserve society? Now, conservatism has come to mean conserving the status quo. Now, that's the problem. When conservatism only means the status quo, whatever the dominant status quo, and the status quo is abortion and gay marriage, then to be conservative means upholding gay marriage or conservatism. Then, no, I'm not a conservative. Then fuck that shit, right? That's the whole line of problem here. Well, and back to the Polish example of what you talked about, the elites. I talked about the structure, about I went off on the thing about some of the videos about the question of the elites, AA, the things like this. Okay, I have a gayist Wilson says here, am I correct to say that left-right positioning comes from during the French Revolution? Yes, but no also, because it comes from immediately after that. The left-right thing came from what happened in the French Assembly at the early stages of the revolution, where the reactionary elements were on the right, of the extreme right end of the convention and the debate. In other words, it was like this: the radicals on the extreme left of the room, the moderates were in the middle, and those on the most reactionary were on the extreme right, keeping far away from each other. Right, that was the way that because these would start beating each other up and attacking each other. Right, so yes, it was the staging of how the assembly, the French Assembly, arranged itself politically. And this is how, and usually in parliamentary, European parliamentary models. Now, in the American model, no, the Americans never really, it was just people who got along. It was geographically at first, the seatings in the House and the Senate was related. Then what happened was it kind of moved more to voluntary, and certain people got kind of, they made arrangements to switch desks. I like this guy, these guys I like, these guys I don't. It became more association. The House of Commons was always government on one bench and the opposition was on the other bench. And it looks this way because the bench is here, so those to the left of the podium, the speaker, if the speaker looks from the point of view of the speaker, look the speaker seat with table and those things, looks out on the right is the government, on the left is the opposition. But from the observer's point, from the back areas and the benches like this, from the door, the entry of the parliament, you get a different perspective, and that is that the government is on the left. I mean, if you're viewing the speaker's chair, it's on the left is the, so therefore left right doesn't have the same meaning. You know, from the English parliamentary perspective, it is always relative to this. But again, I think you're right. Gayest Wilson is correct at a certain level. That it emerged. The left right came from the seeding of this originally. Okay, now I'm all over the place. So let me go to my point. I'm at half hour, and I'm going to stop and go to my topic I'm supposed to go talk about. Just about my recordings. I'm on hiatus until September, but I'm posting videos from my introduction course thing. So starting next week, you'll be seeing the reruns of the first couple classes. On Fridays, I will always do live streams. So, or if not a live stream, a special option thing. And I might, and to be honest, I have to announce that we're coming close to 500. We're making movement to 500. We broke the 490. We're about 7 subscribers, new subscribers away from 490. So 500. So we're 593. So we're kind of in the live stream. I want to respond to 3 comments before going to my little diatribe about my interest right now, something I want to talk about that I posted the books on. I got a Mark Thomas 4448 replying to a Machiavelli video this week. My thoughts and things. He goes, they thank me for the series, and may I contact you with a question? Yes, please. I'm going to reply to his email like this. Mr. Greengrass asked me, what do I think of Ludwig? That is a big question. I will probably talk about Edward. Edward Ludwig is a very interesting character who I kind of knew in the 90s, or early 80s, late 80s and early 90s, and liked. I kind of, as he turned more kind of critical, he kind of went very in other words, he was one of the people on trade, was ahead of the game on the trade question. He was very critical. He kind of, in the 1992 election, this is where I made a mistake. I didn't take Ross Perot's thing seriously. I kind of agreed with the free trade agreement as a mechanism. I thought by bringing economic to prosperity in Mexico and other places would lessen the economic, in other words, migration economic. The problem with that was that Mexico never politically aligned in the way it should have realigned. The corruption and the political culture that was there long fielding never allowed it to realign. So therefore, you always had the political and social chaos that drove people northward, and the ethnic, the conflict between different groups and the different classes in those groups led to situations from being marginalized that drove them up there. And last but not least, so Ludwig, I'll do another video. I might do a video about Ludwig, maybe next week or something like that. I tend, and Corlitz wrote today, 4 hours ago, about last week's live stream about my comments about Morgoth, because I tend to agree about Morgoth, who reflects some of the limitations of British nationalism, why it probably remain a working class subculture, even if support for reform and Farage grows. In the next few weeks, I'm going to be reading Contentious book, The King's Two Bodies, which I read was influenced by German conservative revolution. Yes and no. I will probably even address this. I might make a video about Kantorovich, because he's very interesting. His book on Frederick II is very important. In fact, it was that he was Bappa's recommended biography of Frederick II, which is a great book of that period, and that was the King's Two Bodies, which influenced on ideas of power. Yes, the King's Two Bodies did indirectly influence Foucault's body biopolitics, right? Well, I have started this. This is I'm going to finish this. Go watch my video on the Crown that I did several years ago about the Crown. I should do a video on Kantorovich, so I will respond to Corlitz separately. So I'm not going to talk about that much today. So I really should take a note, Ludwak and Kantorovich. I think I may do that next week. I next week will address those two thinkers. But today, I want to spend the remaining time of my live stream addressing what I put today on today's wonderful thing. I got into a little last Sunday. I was kind of reading something. I kind of found one of my old books. Charles Tilly's The Politics of Collective Violence, something I read a long time ago. Tilly's Violence book is a very interesting book because he looks at the question of violence, the collective violence, and how collective violence operates in the political realm. People might remember Tilly is part of what Sam McAdams was it. I get the names wrong. Sidney Terrell and Doug McAdams for their work called Dynamics of Contention, which looked at the contentious politics, but looks at it from the group and associational identity perspective, associational, which looked at it as the individualist act. In other words, as he says, in other words, that the nature of their project was more voluntaristic, actor-centered analysis. Okay, in other words, it was voluntaristic. It was the idea of voluntaristic, actor-centric. It was like more economic. See, economic thinking is voluntaristic. It's consent-based constructions of choice and consent. And Tilly rightfully sees something. I think he gets it from Feiner about the concept of coercion as being necessary. So, in other words, politics is this balance between economics and mere coercion is despotic structure, despotic. So politics is this interaction where is some coercion, but some voluntaristic contention. So this is the voluntaristic and the non-voluntaristic. Okay, coercion is non-voluntary. You get people to agree through persuasion and also interest, carrots and sticks, right? But then the sticks are the coercive elements, right? Sticks are coercive. Violence is the most of coercion. There's the, I'm going to take away your goodie. I'm going to take away something you want, versus I'm going to use violence against you, right? The coercion. Remember, that was the main definition of the state in Weber's definition, that the modern state has the state in the modern form of the politics is that the state is the only body that has the legitimate use of coercion. Okay, it has the sole exercise of legitimate use of violence in that sense, right? That is Weber's definition. And this is why we must look at the question of the violence within a social setting, not by the state, or by the state at one level, but also by the people who constitute the state. Because remember, the state is a constitutive construction of the body politic. The state is the state is both the government. So we have to distinguish between state as government and state as body politic, or the society, the civil society that is formed. And I think we have to understand that this is the real construction, that society is this larger social network where in it, that not only are there individuals, but also groups of individuals that form communities. And therefore, these communities within the society are interacting. Now, the difference is, this is the Gemeinschaft-Gesellschaft problem, which I've talked about before, and I think is constantly variable, this tension between community and society, where community is more non-voluntaristic, intimate, naturalistic, lived experience, people living and sharing community together, where society is pure utility-based constructions of voluntary associations and voluntary agreements. That's what Durkheim kind of very highlights, that the division, that society, large-scale society, is only possible because of division of labor, and therefore shared. In other words, division of labor creates interdependency, that you get a common benefit of interdependency because the different parts delivered services that deliver the whole, the goods of the whole. So that the idea that society, this is why society and state are synonymous twins in this sense. And Hobbes's silence on society is quite telling, because he's a Hobbes who talks more about the state, because he doesn't want society to have a, if society is a twin of the state, wouldn't society has a claim to authority that then the state doesn't? So, but by doing it this way, by merging the political and the social in the way he does. Now, yes, this echoes the Greek world, but at the same time, it creates the situation of the two interfold. And he admits the existence of the second, but he suggests that it's basically it's kind of the same phenomena, just operating at different levels. And this becomes the crisis in modern political thinkers. Is all the gap between the political and the social. This is the liberal. The liberals want a gap between this, and the non-liberals don't. Either they want to flip the political into the social, or the social into the political. This is the contention. In fact, that's the division in that sense. But the topics that I pick, why his on violence? I think this is important. This leads me to Tilley's other book. I got this in 2000, when it first came out, 2006. I forget 2008, 2006, and it came out then, if I remember correctly, 2006, right? Yeah, 2006. And that's when I got this one. I got this monster when it first came out, because this was because I've always been interested in the regimes or politeia in that sense, and that Tilley was going to talk about this. Now, Tilley wrote a piece on regimes and contention for the chapter in the book Handbook of Political Sociology. I give the reference to it, which gives a kind of summary of the regime concern and contention of that. And I give which then I also give another Tilley thing on a chapter in another volume of writing that he gives on violence, on political violence, that he deals in the Tilley Reader, which I think is very good. So Tilley has been a very interesting person to me, because Tilley has always been one of this. In fact, he was a person who studied early. His early work was on French, the development of the French state, and he had this big, huge volume on the essays about the political dynamics of the modern state, which is it's Princeton University Press from the 1980s. It's a monster book. It's hard to get. It's fantastic. He wrote a book on the development of the French state and the way the modern French state and the evolutionary prospect of this, that is on par with Schmitt's analysis in dictatorship. So Tilly was a very interesting. Tilly, I would see Tilly is like Sam Finer. Sam Finer was this historian about the man on horseback and things like of the origins of the state and state development. I co-authored a piece on political change, on the connection between coercion and the interaction between demands of a society and the coercive means to get those demands done. That Finer raises and connects it to the Gabriel Almond / David Easton's political system of this structures of this. I wrote that with this Polish professor, just a young Polish professor. We published it, and that's put up on my things. I should maybe put a link to it. But it's in my. If you follow my academic social media, you can follow that piece that I wrote a couple years ago. Why I think this is important? Because I think Finer has a very specific historic understanding of state development. Now, Tilly takes this, and he's a sociologist, a political sociologist, and understands it like this. And then with his move away from that to his contentiousness, working with Samaro, led him to look at the question of regimes, which they reject. Because if you add regimes into the actor-centric model, it adds a complexity that the system, their actor-based, the title was their original title, The Dynamics of Contention series, two or three volumes of the next minute that they had, the Dynamics of Contention with the first volume, right? Its actor-based model was already so complex that if you bring this political regime into the question, regime structures, it adds a level of complexity that really collapses. It makes overburdens. That's what he said. Therefore, this is why the regime, what he wrote, the chapter on the regime and contentiousness was kind of an orphan child. That's why it's that chapter there. It becomes the introduction to this book, and he opens that line here of this wonderful book, and the preface is, "Behold, an orphan that became a beloved child." In other words, what began as a chapter for a part of the Contentious series that was just then said, no, it doesn't fit. It just makes it very too complicated. So he puts it separately, traded it, and then he thought about it separately, kept on doing it. Now, he dealt with the regime also in its earlier work, okay? I mean, is it earlier? Yeah, this is what, 2003? 2003 republished, 2004, 2006, and it's recently there by Routledge recently again. This is cool. What's so interesting about this is this problem, and this is something he hooks up in his contention series about this, is the problem of violence. This is where he hooks up the violence thing into his contention argument in ways that he kind of only less does so here. But this problem here of what he says, of the extent of coordination among violent actors and the salience of short-run damage. Okay. You see that? And this is the stages of this. At the individual, then at the collective level. High, low, high, low of the two categories in here. And then we see what? We see the different, the zones are the different types of activities. So individual aggression, brawls, which are start out as individual, then goes collective. Opportunity, scattered attacks, broken negotiations, coordinated destructions, and violent rituals. These are the structures. Now, he goes even further here in his typology, where this is the regime, government, his famous regime typology that he highlights. Democracy versus what do you call competency, right? Capacity. High, low. This echoes on what this takes Dahl's original conception and reshapes it into his, and then creates three zones: the zone of what we call authoritarianism, zone of authoritarian, zone of citizenship here, and then last all the way down here, the scattered, the zone of fragments of fragmented tyranny. And then the middle of this, maybe we call this, a non-citizenship, non-democratic structures, right? Or even has something, anarchy. Here's kind of like, over here is kind of like a zone of anarchy, you could say, right? Over here, zones of anarchy. And then here you have zones of oppression, tyranny. So you have a very, because he doesn't highlight a zone of anarchy, but I would. And I would even maybe even suggest that here this is where the zones of right here is mixed politics, where there's plurality in that sense. It's kind of a pluralism here. Then there's kind of what we say here, the zone of oligarchic rule, right? So therefore, autocratic oligarchic rule, right? Where it's low capacity. In other words, it's not pure authoritarian. It's not. It's rule of the few, but it's not authoritarian because it doesn't have the power, right? So therefore, it's not efficient enough, not effective enough. So therefore, this gives us kind of a very good introduction to the understanding. Now, why I mention this because what's happening in Deadpool in places like England, the violence lately. Both AA had a video reacting to the events in England, and then also two videos. One was by Keith Starmer's condemning of this, and basically somewhat declaring a war on the radical right, which I think is a scapegoating of the radical right for the British upper class's failure to really address the immigration, the identity, the destruction of English society by the failure to integrate the newcomers into British society by any means. In other words, you had a deconstruction of England over the 30, 40 years that has now come to roost. And that you have significant population, and you saw their effect of their capture, the Muslim capture of the Labour Party. If it wasn't for the Muslim vote, the Labour Party we would have had a hung parliament. The Muslim vote, the strong, the large elements of the large segments of English towns and cities that are populated by significant Muslim communities from Pakistan, Africa, and elsewhere that are strong enough that they voted and supported, and they became a essential voting bloc for Labour in those areas. That without they would have, if they ran an independent Muslim party, they may win enough seats, but they would basically prevent, it would force a more coalition. But rather, they sought to capture Labour in that sense. And Labour, therefore, the British, under the Blair years, they played a kind of 2-2 game. This two-tier policing was created under the Blair kind of rules. Why? Because they wanted to police, but they didn't want to have, they turned a blind eye to BIPOC and Muslim communities because they thought this would only lead to contentiousness. So they developed a policing that kind of pacified those groups with a kind of passive thing, that they would not act directly, but they would act after. They might take action to the most violent and just dangerous people days or weeks later, where it wouldn't, but not in the event. In the event, they tried to just block off the groups, prevent reaction, just stabilize. No, don't take any arrests and don't do like this. Take pictures so that you know who to look to, and then later act, but keep it quiet because you don't want to. This is the reality of English policing. That Keir Starmer his identity is that of a prosecutor, right? I think that's why Starkey's video about Starmer is essential to understand, and why under Starmer's England will become a police state. But it is that factor. In other words, the tensions that are already there, the fragmented society that is modern England, modern Britain, the Labor government believing that it won authority and doubled down on stupid. In other words, they have a majority. They won an authority, but they don't have that mass. I mean, as what's his Matthew Goodwin politely in a series of videos about the election in his data in his self stack and these highlight that there's no. They won. Their majority in Parliament because of the way that the system works is huge majority. A parliamentary majority is a huge majority. They can achieve everything what they want with no serious blockage from the opposition. So, but the problem is that there's no support for that in society. They don't have the majority support in society. In fact, and I think that what support they got and the voter turnout it does not take into account the significant decline of voters. If you look at the 2018 election versus 2018-2019 election versus this, there was a significant decline of voters, of who turned out and who didn't turn out. And a lot of people who voted Tory, a lot of Brexit voters who voted Tory in the last election stayed home this time. They either voted Reform or even conservatives might have voted Reform too. British conservatives who were conservatives who voted for Brexit and was big Brexit supporters felt betrayed by the Johnson and that's why go look at the Chris Williamson interview with Dominic Cummings online that's available. Go watch it. Cummings really shows that what destroyed basically makes it clear what Johnson and his whore, his girlfriend whore, who became his latest wife, took control. In other words, they looked at Keith Starmer and they said, "Oh, Starmer's not real. I don't have to do any. I don't have to fight to keep power. They're gonna." So I don't have to do anything. So I get rid of leave the Cummings and the Leave people because my whore doesn't like them. She and her London friends don't really like Leave people. So this is why Johnson's position on Leave was always more opportunistic after his marginalization and loss of his mayor and in other words, not welcome into the Cameron party, Cameron's government in that sense. And that's why he turned his own way, because in many ways he and Cameron were kind of friendly, but they were also opponents. And that you have to remember that as mayor of London, he kind of paved the path for Sadiq Khan in terms of its liberal cosmopolitanism. A bohemian character, Johnson, was never really a true conservative in this sense, and therefore this is the problem. And I think Starmer is right. But back to the problem of this, that I think that you have a perfect sewer of the political reality. You have a corrupt, as Cummings rightly, Cummings' firsthand insider account of Westminster and the Westminster culture and the political elites, and the London-centric character of the political elites intersects perfectly with what Matt Goodwin argued demographically, both in his Substack pieces and his analysis and his his book Values, Virtues, and Voice. Now, these factors taken together, if you understand that, then the creation of the violence, the death, the murder of those 3 girls by that immigrant, or not first generation immigrant, but second generation. I mean, the BBC and the media, but his parents were immigrants, not him. He was born in Britain. Was he? Was he shaped by British culture, British identity, English culture, English identity? Or was he continually aligned with a Muslim subculture that was anti-British, anti-white? Again, I recommend Carl Jeremy's book, The Unprotected Class, to understand anti-white mentality. And I would even add that book by, I don't remember the guy, on colonialism, in Britain it's colonialism. It's not slavery as much as that, but it's the colonial past. It's the in fact, a lot of the woke agenda is revenge. You came to us, and we're gonna. It's based on revenge of the colonial peoples on the British peoples. It is kind of a rape revenge narrative in that sense, that woke identity in the sense that it's you did it, you violated us and you colonized us. Honestly, English colonization. My Israeli friend made a very powerful talk when I talked to him. No one fucking cares. No one cares about Africa. In the 1990s and early 2000s, no one cared what happened in Africa because no European, except the French, who see glory in their power, potential for French glory in their politics in Africa. No other European power wants to get their hands dirty dealing with the Africans. The Chinese are there only for one reason, that is the goodies, the resources. They have no desire for glory. They only have the desire to get resources. And therefore, their tolerance level of black nonsense is going to be very, very low. You can see that in that movie, Deserts of Sand. About a decade ago, there was an underground video about this, about the Chinese manager working with black middle management or middle assistants dealing in development, Chinese businesses operating in Africa, and how they, this interplay between the Chinese executives over there and their translators and the people that they're interfacing with, the local population, the levels of corruption, stupidity, and the Chinese guy saying, "Look, shame on you, Africans! The British gave you these roads, these railroads, and you just fucked them up. How dare you? When we got them, the British and those foreign colonists gave us these things. We took them and we maintained them. You got them also, and what you do, you fuck them up." That was a hilarious. Mr. Medicare used to play that video a decade ago, and I still love it. I wished I downloaded it because it's the YouTube police removed those videos. That video is a fantastic video. Explain to understand the Chinese attitude on this is going to be much hypocritical. They're hypocrites. They use white guilt as a mechanism to wage war with the Europeans and the Americans, but they don't apply that to themselves. They will be ruthless pursuing their interests in Africa and elsewhere. But they will use our guilt about our colonial past and our racial incidences as a weapon to kind of say, "Oh, you can't criticize us, you're worse." It's like that scene in the movie. It's perfectly like that scene in the miniseries about Nuremberg. That little made-for-TV movie about Nuremberg in the early 2000s, which you had, what's his name? One of the brothers, Balin brothers, the one who shot someone in the movie. He plays the prosecutor, Robert Jackson, has a love affair interest with her. That was silly. But it's the Jewish medical psychologist. There's a scene where they just heard from the camp at Auschwitz, talking about this is in purely clinical terms about how do you exterminate the Jews. But this was not done out of hate. This was how you handle it. And they asked, the psychologist wanted to hear what was motivation. They asked these questions, and he goes, "Well, no, this is like rats, rat catcher and killing the rats. Didn't really affect me in my moral life. I had my normal life." Very kind of banality. That was the movie kind of adapted a Hannah Arendt banality of evil thing, where I think if you really examine it, there's evil there. Okay, there is kind of something more than that. But the way it was presented in the movie, then the doctor confronts her Gurr, who then goes into this, and he goes in, "Oh, you did Hiroshima, you Americans, you think you would have done that to Germany? So, would you why didn't you intern the Japanese, but you didn't intern the Italians and the Germanic population?" You're black. How do you treat black officers are not lead to command white troops? So you're the hypocrite. In other words, you're the hypocrite. And he goes, and then he says, Jews, the Freemasonry of the Jewish merchants destroyed Germany after the war, and therefore you can. The reason why you, the doctor, cannot understand our laws. Our laws are identical to your. Okay, our laws are maybe a little more extreme, but mostly identical to your segregation laws. So you see the problem here, and this is the liberal. Oh my God, we're just like the Nazis. No, our segregation laws did not exterminate the blacks. I'm sorry. This is why someone like David Starkey's comment, the comment that got him in trouble about the damn blacks, right? I mean, genocide, there's too many blacks, too many damn blacks, so that there can be a genocide. Genocide means a radical decrease of a population, not an increase. This is why the whole argument, there's a genocide going in Gaza, is complete nonsense. Because if there was a genocide in Gaza, you look at the population chart, you would not see population growth, you would see radical population decline. Since there is not radical, even if they're in the bombings, even if they're in the war casualties, it's still massive. It is not the same as what happened to any population that was affected by mass murder. Ukrainian, the Russians during the Red Terror, the Germans during the Holocaust, the Russians, the ethnic populations of this, the Polish elites under the Russians, the Soviet zone, and the Katyn massacre, the repressions of the 1940s after that, and mass incarcerations and murders of elites under Stalin. The two different, the Great March, the Great Leap Forward, and then the Cultural Revolution, and then the Tiananmen reaction. You show me every the Khmer Rouge, Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge regime, the immediate victory by the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese over into Vietnam, and the mass migration and massing of southern populations and class, and there was either racial groups, classes that were driven to population decline. That is genocidal. So, but if we look at England, England is at that weird moment where you have a tipping point. And it only takes one thing. Now, the murder. I mean, they've arrested Tony Robinson. That's his mate, his pseudonym, nom de plume, right? He's now in prison. Now, what happens if he gets killed? They put him in a Muslim. Centric. The Labour government is vindictive. Keith Starmer's type of person is vindictive. He would put him in a situation to want to punish him. They want to punish the English working class. So they will be vindictive to them. They're looking at the policing of the vindictiveness of the white middle working class versus this is going to lead to revolutionary turnover. Violence. And therefore, violence hits a tipping point. The violence by the minority communities against the white society, the retaliation by the white society against the elites, in that sense, these are going to be building up until you have a crisis that then forces the regime to start shooting the police. What happens? Then you create the IRA again. The British didn't. The IRA that took military. Now the question is, who's going to be in the British military? Are you going to get the Muslims to do this? Or are you going to, you arm the Muslims and they start taking the rest? They might then look at the. I don't know about you, but these nice white social liberals in London, I might want their stuff. They might turn on them. See that right now the white elite is safe because they're not feeling the effect of the conflict between the working classes and the BIPOC and Muslim communities, because they're not feeling that effect. But once you arm that Muslim camp and they become the policemen and the military and these things, they have the arms. You don't think they'll look good? They'll look nicely and goody at these soft white liberal elites who are running them and say, "Yummy, yummy! I want to gobble you up." So again, this is why leads us to things. Now, some of the other books I highlight. We're at the 15 minutes over. These classic textbooks. Davies is Why Men Revolt and Why, which is a kind of good textbook reader on all the sources of things and this, and then Ted Gurr's book Why Men Rebel, Free Press. Now, what is not Free Press? It was originally Paradigm, right? Paradigm 2011, but originally published in Princeton University Press in the 1970s. A paperback 71, the 40th anniversary, Taylor and Francis 2010. A Routledge again, Taylor Francis, and then and it's in the current edition published 2016. This version is 2016 in that sense. This again, the 40th anniversary edition. This is a book about what? About change. Why Rebel? It's a new introduction to the 40th paperback edition. New paperback edition introduction by the editor. And then what he does is he introduces chapter 1 was explanation of political violence, 2 the relative deprivation and imperatives of violence. The intent 3 is the intensity and of scope and relative deprivation. 3 the social origins of deprivation, the sources of being of rising expectations. His argument was. The social origins of deprivation, that is, he says, what are the social origins? He does 2. He does rise of expectations, and 2, he deals with the deterrence of value capacities, in other words, the limits of this. And I think this is a very interesting argument in this sense of it is. And then he says perspectives on violence. He says the socialization, socialization, tradition, and legitimacy. The second on his perspectives of, in other words, perspective on violence and politics, he says ideologies, utilities, and communication. Then he says chapter 8 is the course of balance, the question of the balance of any regime and how much you ought to do it. And that subchapter is the balance of regime and dissident coalitions, coercion, questions of regime coercion, a note on rational conflict models and negative sanctions, and then lastly, dissident coercion, how dissident groups use coercion as well to enforce things. You see this in how the IRA used mechanisms of coercion to promote loyalty in that sense, and organizations of things of this. The balance of institutional support, the question of institutions. Next, chapter 10 is the causes and process of political violence, which he concludes the book. And then he has an appendix, lists of hypotheses and corollaries. And then he has the bibliography, right? The bibliography. Again, this is a classic. This is a book people should study and read and to understand, violence, political violence, and the way revolution, why people rebel, why people act. This is still a classic, and I think this is something that people should pay more attention to. Now, this is more of a kind of a reader. This has all these wonderful little essays. It looks at introduction about the thing is the text by him, but then the section part is how individuals and societies meet the challenge of change. Right there, he has an essay by Tom McNasarek on the Russian monk. Then the Lutheran tragedy, the Lutheran tragedy about Luther's things by Margaret Phillips. Then the little section of this by Friedrich Engels, the Peasant War in Germany by Engels. Then he looks at R.J. Book, the Village Community and Coalition of Capitalism in Asia. When servants sever ties with masters, again, this is the threat of abandonment. Again, when servers sever their ties with their masters, national independence. Again, so these are Manneroni. So again, these read these things. And then Group Identity, Marginalization, Rebellion, Race, and Rioters by George Wada and James Davies. Again, he himself, an article he wrote, a section of this. And then he looks at the revolutions in China and Mao. In other words, Genesis of the Communist, the Childhood of Mao Zedong by Edgar Soule. In other words, of the childhood, talking about Edgar Soule's kind of childhood of Mao Zedong. From Edgar Soule about the days of Changsha, in other words, the time of the young revolution in China and Mao, days in Changsha, and then last is the Prelude to Revolution. So taking the biography of Mao Zedong and then looking at it. Oh, I see everyone's gone. No one's here. And then section 3 is about some theory. He has 2 pieces from Aristotle about the brows of the ancient Zeus's, right? From the Politics, readings from the Politics, some reading from the Nicomachean Ethics, and then he has like three readings from Equality and the Expectations by Agnes de Tocqueville, basically on the book on the Revolution, the French Revolution, and the Ancien Regime and the French Revolution. Equality and Rising Expectations. Again, this is how, equality and rising expectations has 3 things. How the spirit of revolt prompted the well-intentioned efforts that improved people's lot. How the reign of Louis XVI was the most prosperous period. And then how the given facts set forth by the preceding chapters. The revolution was foregone conclusion. And then he talked about Marx and Engels, about that, in other words, nothing to lose but regain your dogmas and righteousness, bourgeois and proletarian. And then David Schwartz's A Revolutionary Theory of Behavior, some theories of behavior. And then James Davies' stuff towards a theory of revolution, in other words, the state of the revolutionary mind. Again, this is why. And then chapter 4, we get what? Some mental and social antidotes of revolution. So he will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 readings. One from Stanley Elkins on slavery and personality. Another one by a series of frustration and aggression. In other words, aggression follows frustration. So the article, research article by Frustration and Aggression, definitions by Dowell, Dobbs, Miller, Haller, and Sears, an article from I think from the 70s. Again, from the same article, Dow and others, right? Aggression follows from frustration, psychological principles, part 1. The second 2 is aggression follows from this. This is psychological principles 2. So the different 2 levels of psychological principles dealing the idea that aggression follows from frustration, right? So there's 3 readings from that Dow and et al., right, on aggression. Then aggression, nature, and nurture. A little short piece by Leonard Berkowitz, the study of urban violence, some implications of laboratory studies of frustration and aggression. Okay. So in other words, a continuation of those frustration and aggression hypotheses. Again, this is very relevant to studying what's going on, both of you look at events. Why didn't the trucker rebellion turn violent? Why didn't, yes, the protests and the yellow vests and Europe now, the farmers, why do these events, why didn't they hit revolutionary cycle? What's happening in Britain, these events are on the teeter. In other words, is revolution no longer possible, or what? What is the triggering effect that will cause this? In that sense, we should look for the causes. Now, the question is, this is the 2 types of actors. There's the state actor, the existing status quo protector, which is to prevent that from happening, or therefore to introduce counteractions that will prevent the revolutionary moment. And then there's the radical activists, but also not regime actors who want the status quo, but also contra interests who don't want revolution because they fear the other side is going to win. Like the Muslims don't want revolution, and they're not. In other words, the Muslim population in England is not big enough. If the white, this is that famous line from Dennis Murray. Do you really want to go down that line that that colonizers are bad because you're the who is the Aboriginal peoples of England, right? That line by Dennis Murray. That's a great response by Murray. I think people should pay attention. That was Murray, who I would argue was a neoconservative in every sense before, but has become dark and black. Seeing what happened earlier in the early thousands and how immigration in England, what happened to his England, what's happening to England and Europe has really turned him down, and how the liberal elites turned it down, and then what happened with Israel in that sense made it existential for him. Even though he's not a Jew, even though he's not Christian, he's still Christian in terms of his culture, English. He sees the culture. Now he's not a believing. He's not a. He wouldn't call himself a good, nice Anglican, but he was shaped by the English Anglican culture, and that position he talked about the original population of England, and who's the invading colonizer now. Okay, if you want to play the game you're playing against the Israelis, okay, we can play that game too. Why don't we? Why don't we in Britain play that game? Mm-hmm. Do you really want to go down that game? As he says that to the trigonometry guys, and he said that to another person too. I think he saw the power of that danger and threat. The question is, does he sees that as the real thing, but does he, in his heart, will he? He doesn't have the heart to then actualize that threat. Okay, you have to have a person who is ruthless enough to pull the trigger. This is something I always said about to my left-wing colleagues who talk about, gay activists and these guys who push, revolutionary violence or radical change. I go, you guys are too few. And most of you don't know. Most of you, if it came push to shove, you wouldn't slit someone's. Would you kill someone? Really? Would you do it? Really? Because those other guys will, and there are more of them than you. And in a war of attrition, I'm sorry, there's going to be more. I mean, yes, there's growing numbers but the white working class still is the larger population. And if you let the English soccer hooligans out with weapons against the Muslims, I'm sorry, it's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a bloodbath. I'm sorry. That is it will be ugly. It'll be nasty. It will resemble Rwanda. Hey, Labour Party, you're going to be responsible for this. Keith Starmer and Starmer's Labour Party, Tony Blair, you're the cause of what will become the greatest tragedy of this. The question is, what will happen to England? Will it reset? Will be pariah if it does that? Yes, it'll be pariah. Oh, so therefore the decent people don't want to become a pariah, so they'd rather be, So what is the course of moderation? Enforcement of the law, preventing that it's still too late. It's that famous song by Tony. It's a little too late. It's a little too long. It's a little too late to do anything. In other words, what could have been done with moderate measures a decade ago have been this is the real tragedy of the conservatives. It got even after Brexit, it got worse. The mass migration. It was almost like this was done to punish the England. The nice, this is what it was. Operation Punish those Brexit voters. We're going to, you Brexit sons of bitches are forcing us to leave the EU. We're going to punish you. We're going to triple the numbers of migrants. We're going to let them, not from you're not these white Europeans, but these Africans and Asians, and we're going to flood your communities with them, right? This is like almost like this is a point where mere incompetence the willful, the stupidity and doubling down of an incompetent position, intentional continuation becomes, and the malicious attitude of the elites and vindictive attitudes of the remaining elites towards the Brexit voters and the white working classes who primarily supported leave it leads us to a situation where that I mean, God, it is. I'm sorry, this is excessive and going to lead to violence. I mean, even by this is repressive regime model structures. I'm sorry that the cycle of violence and cycle of oppression is enough that this continues at a certain level. You will have revolution. You will have revolution. So what about, let's finish up this section. And then he will talk about what he says. He'll talk about the last situations. And some social science combine theory and research, right? And he has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 readings. So one is by Bruce Russert on inequality and stability, like land tenure and politics. Second is socioeconomic change and political instability. This is Mancur Olson's rapid growth as Mancur Olson Jr.'s rapid growth as destabilization. And then he looks at cross-national analysis of political instability, so a page of that. And then he has aggressive behavior within polities, 1948-1962 cross-national studies by Ferdinand and Freebrand, Ivo and Rosalind Firebrand. And then cross-national intervening on political instability, gauging thresholds of frustration by Lloyd Free. And then the next one is violence as ends, means, and catharsis. Political violence in Venezuela, 58 to 64 by Guide. Instability in Latin America, Dimension and Social Violence in Latin America by Douglas Beale. And then model building and tests the theory that causal model of social strife. A comparative analysis using new indices. The indices here is by Gurr himself. Okay, and then a durable generalization, which is Crane Britton's is a non-tentative opinion about some tentative uniformities, the summaries of revolutions. And then the argument. So again, this is a very good textbook to introduce something into this. So it's expensive, but those of you who are going to teach yourself political science, get your teachers something. You take these two textbooks, read them carefully. You will learn a lot more than you think to understand political change than by talking about I'll go read some of this right wing. To be honest with you, this is why I can't stand what is it? Oh, come on, I'm blanking. I'm blinking it. What's his name? The tradition that just at this Italian. I'm blanking not Zola. I know the name. It's not Schmidt. Schmidt is good as a lawyer. Schmidt is a lawyer. Schmidt's a lawyer. Schmidt's understanding this in the framework of this analysis of the friend enemy dispute. But he really doesn't understand. He points to the legal structures of this, but to understand the societal forces of this, you have to go deeper. Okay? And Schmidt doesn't get you there. Schmidt may give you historical understandings of legal frameworks and how they emerge. So you understand the institutional legal structures that shape that, but not human behavior itself. Okay, he might understand some. When he comes up there, he comes up with little simplistic conceptions of class, which is one-dimensional in that sense. It doesn't really address larger concerns. What else? Come on. What's on there? Evola, that's what it is. Evola has always been one of the people I find useless as a political thinker. He talked about, this is why even someone like AA, who turns not to Evola and to Carlyle, to understand that this is all metaphor. This is a romantic metaphor to understand. Now, again, I understand why AA, who's a literary historian, who operates at the level of metaphor, is thus attracted to it. Now, he kind of went beyond that by calling it economics, but then he kind of went back away from the hard mathematical analysis to more metaphoric analysis. And in a way similar to what I mean, AA, the path that AA took is almost similar to the same path Gad Saad took, but in different directions, right? Gad Saad's use of metaphor to go defend individualism, AA's metaphor to affect national identity, national construction. In other words, the metaphors they pick is therefore, it's a choice of metaphor. The metaphor you pick, the metaphor direction you take it, not the scientific model. This is why I still kind of respect Ed Dutton a lot more in this sense, because he sticks to the model. His analysis leads him to where it takes him. There is this willingness to accept the model, accept the reality of the model, and accept the way they're going. So that's my little guide. You can check the reading list for my recommendation for a study of change and violence that I would say welcomes young scholars and people wanting to educate themselves to go do. But I'm going to stop here. It's a long stream. I thank you. Please, if you've not already liked it, you have 2 likes. If you are new here, the people who do hit the like button helps. I hope people who were here liked it and moved it away. Also, you had about maybe 4 or 5 people today. Come and go like the Michelangelo. Maybe they'll watch it after. I hope people watch it after. If you didn't like it, those of you coming after, please hit the like button. It helps the algorithm. Now, if you didn't like it, you can always say, I didn't like it because you talk. You're annoying. You ramble. You forget. Why don't you have it more structured? I promise next time I will talk about Ludwig and I'll respond to Corlitz's position about Ernst Contentious, because that's. I'll get my King's Two Body out. I studied that a long time. I have a problem with Contentious's King's Two Body. It misleads. It's again a metaphor. It's at one level, it's a conceptual metaphor. It understands something in a certain way and it works at a medieval way, but then it collapses. And I think this leads to the conception of state sovereignty, and it's an interesting thing in that sense. So the King Two Bodies is the way Contentious's discussion of the King Two Body is this primitive, the medieval world. He relies on Shakespeare for this, Shakespeare's English history and that things. And yes, and the English model, the English example gives the clearest model. But then he looks to his own Frederick II as another realm in that sense. Again, go look at my video in my videos years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the Crown as a Political Form a video where I highlights many of these themes. I should have a link to it, but it's there. Well, again, like it, share it out there. You get people to subscribe. We're reaching those magic number of 500, and I said I'd have when I hit 500, I'll have a yay party, break the cork party, whatever. We'll see how that goes. Well, that's it. Go check out my social media links there. Check out Twitter and Facebook. I don't put much public on Facebook because I was being. I didn't want I only wanted friends to see my stuff, and I'm very picky who I become friends with these days. So I'm getting to the point maybe I shouldn't point people to my Facebook in that sense, but I still I use Facebook to kind of still put some initial thoughts out there when I have initial thoughts. This is where I put a little idea out there before I work on it. FYI, I'm working on I finished my little piece of paper for my constitution things. I switched it. Instead of doing my thoughts on what I gave at the conference, I gave the 4 little changes of revolution of the American Constitution instead, which it's been already, I got the page proofs already and okayed them. So I got that, and I have 19 pages on my Aristotle's political anthropology thing I owe in September. So I'm going to be working on that for the remainder of the month. I'll spend some more time next week working on it and editing it a little bit and getting it ready. And then hopefully by September, they'll send it to the editors and they'll get it out for 140 points. Yeah, I need points, man. And I'm going to start working on some more new articles about things. Yes, that's true. And I might try to get energy to kind of finish up my Aristotle's regime point. So those are the things I'm working on. I have to think about. I'm taking August off, as I said, so I will think about the new new video series on what I'll do. Maybe I'll do the video series on political change. Political change, man. And what else? So therefore, that's the structure of what we'll be doing. You go check me out on social media, X more likely that, or my thing. Look at my academic social media links below my social media links, and then if you want to contribute to help, do Patreon or Subscribe Star, or by buying one of my books, either through online, through the local bookstore online, or through the publisher. Well, that's it. I don't want to keep you any longer. I'm at nearly almost 2 hour 40, so we'll stop it. Take care and have a great weekend. Bye bye.